Thanks, Mark.
I usually do record them, Steve. So, folks can go back and view. We try to capture everything we can in the meeting, in the minutes, but of course there's a balance.
Yeah, I understand that, but it was, for me, I just trying to see what happened, and it's like, well, I got a little glimpse, but I still had lingering questions.
Do you want to ask those questions now?
I don't know if we have time today, probably maybe best. Well, yeah, the statutes, there was 3 statutes cited in and I don't follow statutes, so I had no idea what those meant. And I'm not sure we want to get into that now, but then on the decisions, we had a pretty intense meeting on the research priorities, and read the minutes, and we decided to fund all 3 of the projects. And I kind of was, what was the thought process there, and and what changes are going to occur, that kind of, I was kind of left with those questions.
So Steve, I think you're going to be able to put some flesh on those bones today and tomorrow, or today in December. And I came to the exact same conclusion. I wish that I had approached the March and the June meetings with the same intensity and background and study that I've approached this one and December's, because I would have responded differently. Yeah, you're right. So more research would have gone, but I think there's ways to either amend that or affect that today and in December's meetings. And I won't go into much more detail there, but those are great comments. Any other corrections or additions to the minutes?
Yeah, I have a question on the minutes. I think this was the meeting where we did pass a motion. Is that correct? Or was that a prior meeting?
No, I think there was a motion. I think there was a motion in this meeting.
When we did pass that motion should be in the minutes.
If you're referring to the motion on the mission statement,
change. Yeah.
that was the mission statement was in the previous meeting.
That was the previous? Okay. That was my question. I couldn't remember.
Any other corrections or additions to the minutes? Is there a motion to approve them?
I make a motion to approve them.
Thanks,
I
Chuck.
make a motion.
Yeah,
I'll second it.
Okay. Let's just do this verbally. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Then the minutes will stand as written. Jen, looks like it's your turn to give us a facility operations update. Always very informative.
All right. I will preface this with apparently we are about to get doused in rain. I was just pulling that up to a couple of inches on Friday. So we are all hands on deck getting ready for that. We're close. But once it starts raining, there's a lot of things we can't do anymore. So for staff, our hosts that have been here for the last couple months, they left this morning, and then we'll get a new host in October. Sue, she was here in 2020, I think, like in March and April, or maybe April and May. Anyways, she's good, and nice to have somebody returning. We haven't had that in several years. We got our permit from the Army Corps to do the work at the dam to extend our apron to protect the fish from running into the dam or going over. So we've got a grant request before the R&E board, and they're going to meet later this month to see if we'll get the funding for that project. We've asked for like $350,000, like $345,000, I think. So if we get that, then we'll go ahead and go forward with getting somebody contracted to do that work next summer. The landslide doesn't do anything in the summer. It really won't do anything until it rains. We've gotten about 1/10 of an inch of rain since the middle of June. So it's been really hot and dry this summer. So that hasn't helped us up there. Anyways, there's not any growth of anything on that blank wood or dirt, sorry. And so there's nothing growing there to even sort of help hold it together. So probably potentially this weekend, even when it starts to rain, we might get some sediment coming down. So pretty much doing everything that we can to clean our intake out and get it set up and ready to go, so that at the very least we aren't starting with the pile of sediment that we finished the season with. So everything that we're doing right now here at the facility, other than fish culture, is an effort to get ready for winter. So we've cleaned sediment out of our Carnes Creek intake. We're clearing the sediment out of the Fall Creek intake. That should be done in the next couple days. We built a little diversion wall to try and direct flow a little bit more towards the intake, so that it's not as big of a dead zone as it has been in the past. We replaced some broken eye bolts at the dam that were holding the booms in place. We're rebuilding the gate that we use to open and close the trap when there's high water. The wooden gate would bow, and it was really difficult to raise and lower, so we're rebuilding that out of aluminum. We got the sediment out of the adult trap. We had a broken window upstairs repaired. We're working on the chiller again. It's still got a problem that we can't diagnose. We've got some sediment traps to put down in the creek so that we can quantify how much of the sediment that is being brought down from the landslide is actually being deposited in the creek bed. That was something that we were asked to do by Ron Griffiths. So that's what we're working on. There's a tank that had a valve break. We're going to get that repaired here in the next week or so. So lots of projects going on, small things, just trying to get it done before it's pouring down rain and you don't want to be outside anymore. For our operational research, right now we're in the growing of the fish stage. So other than doing our monthly size samples and length and weight checks, we're just feeding as much as we can. They don't eat real well when the sun comes out, which is about 11:30. And they don't eat real well as it gets cooler. So maybe things will get a little easier here in the next week as we get some rain. They seem to like to eat then. But we did find a lot of disease problems this year. Not a lot of water, not a lot of rain, and pretty warm temperatures. So our water temperatures were up around mid 60s for a couple of months, and we hit 70 a couple of times. So not ideal for rearing fish. For education and outreach, Craig has done a couple of dissection classes at different places, not here. The facility is still closed. And so we don't have anybody in our building here. Because schools are back in person, we have been contacted by a couple of teachers wanting to set up field trips. And so my current method is, so far they're asking for times in November. So I'm putting them on the schedule in November with the caveat that if we're not open, it's not going to happen. And even if we are open, I don't know what the guidance would be on large groups. But at the very least, if it happens, they're on the schedule. And so that could be helpful. And then Craig put together a video for that workshop last week as a video tour, since that wasn't held on site. And for adult returns, hasn't rained. There's no water in the creek. This is the lowest I have ever seen it in the 4.5 years I've been here. And so we have no fish yet, but I anticipate that if we get any large amounts of rain, that we will get fish. I've heard that there are a lot of fish in the tide water. And so I anticipate a relatively good season. I've heard really good things about coho, and you know, we'll see what happens. So this afternoon we'll be getting that closer to getting set up and ready to go, with the goal of being set up by the end of the week. Brad, you're muted.
Mhm.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Anyhow, I asked for questions of Jen and you guys couldn't hear me. I apologize for that. But does anybody have any questions of Jen? Okay, apologize for that. And it looks like Mark, you're up for the agency update.
Okay, great. Thanks, Fred. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and because I think that will be helpful. Let's see and get this going.
Hey, also, Mark, when you're done, as far as the pass off to the next, you might as well just keep going since you've got the next agenda item as well. You want to just
Sure. Yeah. Let me. Think I'd be a pro at all this by now, but now my struggling to, let's see. We'll share this one and see how it goes. Let's see, what can you all see?
See the pictures.
Very good. And I'm going to try and run this as a slideshow. So stop share. Apologize for the transition here. Maybe now we can get this working. Screen 3. Okay, I guess that's what we do. Okay, so now I believe you can see properly. So I just wanted to say, and this isn't news to many of you, ocean salmon fishing has generally been very good this summer. And that's evident through the catch records that ODFW posts online. That's the address to them, or you can check in and see. Really, our landings have been improved this year over the past few. And it's also evident through the smiles and the high fives on this slide here. That kid on the right caught her first salmon this year and then followed up with 2 more. And the kid on the left, not about myself, but the other one has just turned into a harvesting machine. So it's been a heck of a lot of fun. And not surprisingly, license sales have also been strong for the agency. So plotted here are the quarterly revenues to the OHRC Research Fund. And as you can see, this past quarter exceeded anything that we've seen in over at least the past few years. So these are, of course, good news that keep us on track for supporting our research center's mission and continue to fund the studies that we have going and possibly others. So with that, I'd be happy to take a couple of questions if we have them. All right, so I'm going to move into a different section of our agenda and talk a little bit about, actually talk quite a lot about our research concept prioritization process. So let me start this up. Can everyone see that slide? Oregon Hatchery Research Center?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So first, a couple of notes, just following on the same format as our last meeting. A note about scientific production. All of you should have received an email from me late last week. Dr. Bluen's lab released a preprint just last week, and so you should have a copy of that if you have a chance. Give it a read. The title is pretty telling about the results. Is Dr. Bluen here with us today? Would you like to say a word or two about this?
Let me see, hang on a sec. Well, this is the result of some work that we, did over time, including at the OHRC. And like the title says, it was kind of a test of the hypothesis that's the premise of all our work, that basically what's under selection is traits that cause some individuals or families' genotypes to be able to grow quickly in the hatchery. And so basically what we found is that the offspring of first generation hatchery fish, they actually grow faster in the hatchery, but have poorer survival in the artificial streams, which is exactly what you would predict from our model, which is that what's under selection is these traits that cause some individuals to grow quickly. When they come back, they pass those genes on to their offspring. The offspring don't survive in the wild because basically they have extreme values of heritable traits in the population. And so this really supports the work that we've been doing, which is trying to find what those traits are under selection and trying to manipulate things about the hatchery that might alleviate that selection. So this lays that argument out as well as provide some data. And also in this, as part of this research study, we also tested the effect of high fat versus low fat diet on whether that would change basically the variation among families in their growth performance. And we found that it did not. The idea here was that hatchery feed is very high in fat relative to the natural diet. And so we thought that there might be a selection on physiological traits that allow some individuals to basically convert that into lean mass more quickly than others. And so that maybe by reducing the fat content, one might be able to even out the performance among families, but that wasn't the case. And so basically, yeah. So that's basically what this shows. But I think it's worth reading it, if only to hear the kind of the argument for the premise of our work laid out in writing, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Bluen. And another quick note before we jump into the real business at hand here. Last meeting, I let you know that we were renovating and updating the OHRC's webpage. That new webpage is now live, so please take some time and come and give us a visit here at this address. You'll find that on the webpage, we have buttons across all of the pages that should help you navigate around. An important note for this group is that we do keep the OHRC board meeting minutes posted online. So if you ever want to go back and visit minutes from a previous meeting, and those are all posted there for you to review. Andrew, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And sorry, you mentioned before we jump into the business at hand. So it's not about the outreach. It's actually about the revenue slide you shared. So I can wait if you'd like, but I just thought I just had a quick question before we get into some other topics, if that's all right.
I think we can go back there. This one?
Yeah, I was just, and sorry I didn't ask earlier. I couldn't get my mute button off in time.
No problem.
But you mentioned that revenue is really high. We're seeing clearly some good results there in the graph. I just wondering how that compares to budget. I assume it's exceeding budget, but just wondering if you can comment on that.
It is far exceeding our outflow right now. Let's see, I can actually pull up that report real quick from this quarter. Expenditures. So total revenue in this quarter came to over $238,000, and the expenditures were 136 or 137.
And so that surplus, how is that managed?
That's what we'll be talking about today, because the agency at the initiation of this biennium committed less than our projections for the biennium. So we have a projected surplus right now. And it will be up to this board, the agency, and the university to decide how that money is to be spent on which kinds of research. So we'll be talking about that through the course of the day.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mark.
Great question. I appreciate it. So I'm going to try and switch.
Excuse me, Mark, can I ask a quick follow-up? This is Carl.
Please do, Carl.
Now, is it actually up or is it cycling? It looks to me like it's in a pattern that's pretty constant across, we only have a couple of years worth of data, but.
So it does cycle, sure. But from the same period last year, we are up.
Oh, right, but not much really.
And so if you look at the dips are increasing, the peaks are increasing. If we're run a regression through there, I think.
Sure, go up a little bit.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's not a heck of a lot, but let's see.
It'd be interesting to see where the next data point lies.
It beats the alternative, Carl.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right. The future is always uncertain, isn't it? Anyhow, moving back into our business at hand, and we are now coming into the 9:30 section of your agenda. We're going to actually depart a little bit from the agenda that you folks received and spend maybe a little bit more time talking about this process of concept and research evaluations and prioritization. So if you'll remember from our last meeting, I outlined a process whereby in September of this year, we would have a hatchery science workshop. And in fact, that workshop has now occurred just late last week. Following that, we'll have a request for proposals that will run through September and into October. Those proposals, research proposals, will then be reviewed in November. The board will get to see the proposals as well as the independent review comments, and then be able to help us make decisions on which proposals to fund. And that funding we expect to occur in January with contracting. So this is a process I outlined last meeting, and we are still on track having conducted this research. So Thursday and Friday of last week, I hosted the spot, and all of us from the OHRC hosted Spawning Fresh Ideas. This was a workshop intended to showcase the OHRC, the ongoing research at the center, and then generate new ideas, new concepts for research that we might support through the OHRC. Again, this was on Thursday and Friday of last week. I announced it back in early August. It involved over 30 participants from multiple universities, including OSU, UW, Idaho, University of California, Santa Cruz, multiple federal agencies, tribal organizations. Of course, ODFW was there, and we had one NGO represented. As Jen mentioned, she and Craig Lawson produced a virtual tour of our facility, and participants were able to effectively walk through the center and see all of the facilities and infrastructure that we have available to researchers as well as students and the public. And then really we got into the core of the meeting was to evaluate research concepts that had been brought forth by participants prior to the meeting and during the meeting. And then we discussed those. We saw some overlap among concepts, so we consolidated those. And then we, at the end of the meeting, we ranked them all with respect to their alignment with the mission and their scientific merit. So this was, I think, a very productive workshop. And at the end of the day, we have a list of proposals, or these are concept proposals to share with you. This is the list of concepts on the right. On the left are the participants from the workshop and the organizations that they represented. And so these concepts on the right are here ranked according to the views of the workshop participants. So there were certainly some clear winners here up at the top, and then down at the bottom. These might be great research concepts, but they perhaps just didn't align well with the OHRC mission. And so they didn't fare well in the rankings. What I hope we can do today is take a look at least the top 10 or 8 or 10 or so of these concepts. And, through a partnership with you, we hope to be able to identify which of these to incorporate in our request for research proposals. So these concepts identify the kinds of information that we believe we need to produce better fish and support better fisheries. So take a look at these, give them a read. You got these last week by email from me. And what we're going to do over the next half hour or so is talk about each one of these. Carl, Sean, Selena, Kathleen O'Malley, and Brad were all involved in the workshop, so they can help answer some of your questions about these concepts. And so let's start with number 1. And
Mark, before we
work our way through the list. Sure, Brad.
yeah, can I interject a thought here? It's real important.
Please do.
It's real important to Sean and Mark and myself that you don't view these particular concepts as the total universe. Don't be restricted by this total number. If there's a topic that you feel is worthy of studying and maybe being considered for funding, by all means, we would like to discuss that today as well.
Absolutely. So if there's an idea, if you believe that there's information that we need that's not represented here by these concepts, we need to hear that today, and we can add that to the list. Toward the end of the meeting, I'll open a poll, and you'll all have the opportunity to express your support of the various concepts listed here, and any that you might add through the course of the day. It's also important to recognize that these are research concepts and not research proposals. So the way this process works, if we back it up a little bit, so here we have solicited and received concepts. We've ranked those concepts. Those concepts will then be presented to the world. These are the research concepts, the ideas, are the information that we believe we need to produce better fish and fisheries. And then we will solicit proposals that address those research concepts through a request for proposals. And because there are different methods, there are different approaches to generate that information. And so we can then evaluate those different approaches, those different methods and proposals, and decide which ones are most aligned with our mission and offer the greatest promise for meaningful, actionable science. So today, don't confuse the research concepts with research proposals. It's just a caution. These are the ideas. These are that we believe we need to rank. So
thank you. We're a bunch of figure it out to get there.
Okay, but I told you what
Yeah.
to do.
Well, okay, yes.
Okay, we want to be sure to mute our mics.
Carl, please mute your mic there. Thank you.
Well, I'm not.
You're fine.
Okay, so bringing us back to,
These on?
I think we have the top 8 research concepts that were brought forth during the workshop. We can just read through these quickly and then talk about them. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay, so the top ranked research concept was, do strategies to manage differences between hatchery and wild fish optimally satisfy objectives? And then it was brought forward that population viability analyses and other modeling approaches might be helped to understand the alternate outcomes. And I can help flesh this out a little bit because I have some language from the author of this concept here. Let's see if I can read this to you. And it goes something like this. Hatcheries can be operated to satisfy different management objectives, augmenting harvest, supplementing natural production, and restoring habitat entail different forms of risk associated with potential differences between hatchery and natural origin fish. Quantitatively managing risk requires an explicit model that combines short-term demographics, long-term genetics, benefits of meeting goals and costs of not meeting goals, and characterization of uncertainty. Explicitly formulating a management model will highlight key assumptions and uncertainties that can be addressed with future research and provide an unambiguous application of research findings to practical decisions in hatchery management. So participants at the workshop viewed this as perhaps one of the most important concepts to address. Maybe Carl or Brad, you could add to this, thoughts from your groups. During the workshop, we broke out into small groups to facilitate the conversations and discussions. And so one of those groups was by our chair, Brad Halverson, another by Carl, another by myself, and another by Sean Clements. So any comments from Carl or Brad, Sean?
Yeah, Mark,
Research
thanks. This particular concept actually entailed, I think, 4 different concepts that were all more or less the same thing. And this is probably the most holistically worded, but there were really, I think, 4 different concepts that all led into this. So there's multiple approaches going on here. And I think the other thing that's important to recognize is that Jim Peterson, who was part of the workshop, indicated that they're already doing some of this in the Central Valley, and it's very productive and it does work. So there's kind of a head start on this already down in California.
I don't have anything to add, Mark.
Questions from
I
board
just have a
members?
question Mark, on this part of this, that PVA and other modeling to understand alternative outcomes. I read that Dr. Falsey's paper and I listened to his presentation down at Port Orford, and that PVA modeling seemed to me so full of holes that it's just pretty much worthless. I don't have a lot of faith in how that would be applied to this.
But it actually gets at, Scott, is the risk assessment that you're talking about. It's a way of calculating risk of different options.
He went through this population viability analysis, and it sort of showed that if hatchery fish are spawning, mating with wild fish in, I don't know, 50 years or something, hatchery fish are going to become totally extinct. But that was almost assuming in that model that every hatchery fish mates with the wild fish, and that every reach of the river, every stretch of the river is actually monitored and brought into the study. But actually down there on the Elk River, when he did that, about 90% of the river wasn't even included, or there wasn't straying in the river enough to make any sense at all. So the modeling was really pretty worthless, I thought. And modeling like that is just a computer generated thing with some ideas behind it, sort of like this whole climate change business. So I'm just not comfortable with the PVA analysis at all.
So one of the benefits of an approach like this, and this is my area of study, working with marine fisheries, is that it actually engages folks, and something like what you're talking about with the assumptions that are in there are actually parameters in the model that you can test. So you can change those and you can say, okay, well, what if hatchery fish don't mate with wild fish at all? What if half of them do? What if 20% of them do? So it's not, these kinds of models are not to say this is what is going to happen. These are models that allow you to test different hypotheses and to look at different scenarios and kind of evaluate how bad one thing might be versus another. And when I say how bad, what I really mean is you know, the consequences that people think may be important to consider in hatchery management.
Oh, well, I understand. Have need to be pretty careful about what you put out with the public, and what was put out with the public down there was the worst scenario, and that's not a very good idea.
I actually really agree with you on that, Scott, and I'm in the process of developing a course here at OSU about for modelers to say this is how you need to communicate what you do with the public because they don't all do it very well.
I agree with you on that too, Scott.
Me too. We need to be very careful about our science communication. What I think we also need to be careful here that we don't confound research concepts with research proposals or work that has been presented. What we're looking at here are concepts that represent information needs. So can we improve our fish and our fisheries by developing a model that includes those parameters that affect our fish, our fisheries, and the uncertainty? So if we have uncertainty around PHOS or around the fitness of our fish, then let's be transparent about that uncertainty and incorporate it in the model so that we can speak to the confidence surrounding our decisions. And I agree with Selena. I think this is and the members of the workshop, I believe this is a very important and valuable tool for us in fisheries management. Sorry about having to flip around.
If I could just say something,
Sure.
Scott, I'm intrigued at your response to modeling, because one of the things I always remember about you bringing to the table is what is the baseline and how the baseline keeps changing, and what is the baseline. I think that clever people like Dr. Feltzy are really useful in helping provide you some tools to assess baselines. So I just want to offer that.
Like Andrew, you've got a question. You've politely got your hand raised. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Brad. I was just curious about Carl's comments about similar studies in California, and just so I assume there's a lot of transferability from there to what could happen up here, and maybe with that just certainty in terms of putting together a research design, costs and et cetera associated with that. Is that fair to say? I guess just trying to understand how much of it would transfer from California to up here.
I think it's fair to say. This isn't my area at all, but according to Jim Peterson, it's working down there. So they have a model. Scott brings up a big, good point, because the specifics are different in every watershed. And so these things have to be tried out and fine-tuned to the location and and to the variables that Scott spoke about. But the model seems to work.
Thanks.
Yeah, let me, Mark, if you don't mind, let me interject another thought here as we go through these concepts. What we're doing right now in our meeting is to try and give you information to, either support or not support this list that Mark
Where
has in
is
front
this?
of me.
This obnoxious
We're going to,
idiot from Coos Bay. He's wearing his
Carl,
Vietnam hat.
Carl.
Not me,
Finley.
Brad. It's
Wait,
not me.
No, it's Carl
I'd
Finley.
love to
Not
see
me
that
either.
meme.
Yeah, thank you. There you go.
You can mute him.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Mark, please do.
Yeah, get rid of them.
Thank you. Anyhow, as I was saying, so the purpose of what we're doing right now in the meeting is to help you get informed on these basic concepts that kind of rose to the top of all the ones that we talked about. At the end of today, we're going to have a poll on this group. I mean, this would be way too much for me as we go through it to try and manage individually. So we're going to ask you as a block, do these deserve to go to the next step, which will be the proposal, the request for proposals, and any others that you may want to add as we go through. So it should make this process a little bit easier. Really, all we're doing, this stage right now is kind of more of an informative stage than it is a debate stage. I mean, there is going to be some debate for sure, but primarily we're just trying to help you get informed on these particular concepts so you can vote on them as a block. Are they worthy of going on to the next step?
Yeah, I had a comment on that first item. So when I first read it, I was kind of thrown for a loop. As far as PVA, population viability, as far as like the Oregon coastal populations, I don't view viable, populations as far as risk of extinction as critical. We have viable populations, so it didn't seem to me it was consistent with the conservation status of our coastal populations. Maybe it's more appropriate for upper Columbia River, above 7 dam populations, but for Oregon coast, I thought it was kind of a very draconian aspect of the status of our populations. I didn't see how it really fit into priorities.
Hey,
So
Steve.
go ahead, Selena. Sure.
Yeah. So again, this is what I do for a living. Actually, mostly I administer now, though. So PVA is actually a fairly broad term and does not have to be restricted to an analysis of extinction risk. And actually, we look at a lot of different outputs when we do a viability analysis. I would actually call a lot of the discussion that happened at the meeting here what Jim Peterson's area of expertise is in just structured decision making rather than PVA. But a modeling exercise can have a variety of outcomes that are your goals, and you can see how the different management strategies or conservation strategies are likely to affect those goals. One of those outcomes can be extinction risk, but it doesn't have to be, and that doesn't have to be the focus. So, for example, an outcome of some of the modeling I do is harvest and biomass or sex ratio. So there's any number of model outputs that could be the focus of the analysis, and often there are trade-offs. So there could be a trade-off where one objective comes out well and another objective comes out poorly. So you can look at those trade-offs as well, including somebody brought up the economic trade-offs and what it costs to actually do and actually implement one of these conservation or management strategies.
Sure, I can appreciate that, but I still struggle to see how the role of the OHRC fits into that, where we're looking at how to rear hatchery fish.
But don't you want to know what hatchery techniques and strategies are likely to give you the most fish to catch? I thought that was what a lot of folks wanted to know.
Well, I view the biggest role of the center as far as minimizing risk to what the natural population.
Exactly. And so that's another output. So you can look at what do these different strategies, you can use models to then say, what do these different strategies do in terms of the trade-offs of how many fish to catch and what the relative risks are to wild fish, or where you're likely to see the largest benefits and or the largest costs.
So I would say so many of the actions that we take in management are done in isolation, right? So we might look at integration of wild fish into the brood stock and how that might reduce risk to the wild population in terms of the genetics. But we don't always look at the flip side and evaluate how does that same action impact the demographics of the wild population that's spawning. We're starting to do that and do that a little better, but building a holistic model, I believe the idea is this: by building a holistic model, we can see how those different management actions interact and affect risk and production at the same time. And I would add that another benefit from this approach is that we begin to understand where we lack information. Maybe PHOS is so, the estimates are so uncertain that any change in PHOS really doesn't affect the outcome. That lets us know that we need to hone in on that, improve our estimates, and that we need more data. So we learn where we need to focus our research and monitoring while we also learn which management actions have the outcomes that we desire.
I think on the Oregon coast, we dialed in PHOS we know PHOS pretty accurately, very precisely.
Selena, could you maybe drill down on Steve's question too, on where OHRC would fit in that particular topic?
So, what usually happens with one of these exercises is, you bring the stakeholders together, you bring the modelers together, you have a conversation, you build the model together sort of in what the different components are. And through that process, you identify, okay, these are the things that we know pretty well, and these are the things that we have a lot of uncertainty about. Now, the model can account for that uncertainty, but you can imagine that if you have a bunch of different things in your model that are really uncertain, it's garbage in, garbage out. So then you just have a wide range of outcomes that are difficult to, say, okay, this one's better than that one. So what the process does is it says, you know what, we can do it. You use the sensitivity analysis to say, well, if we knew this parameter better, if we had a better handle on, how what this interaction is between hatchery and wild fish, for example, then we could make much more accurate predictions about costs and benefits with this model. So then that cycles back to OHRC and says, hey, we need to do some experiments on this issue, or we need to do more literature review on this issue, because actually there's a lot of science being done all over, the West on how these different, what these different parameters might be and what their variances are. So, and it would just also, I think, enable kind of a more direct connection between some of the work that has already been done at the Hatchery Research Center and link them more clearly to management objectives.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll point out this particular concept is one where we saw some redundancies between concepts and made an effort to merge them. And so the PVA and modeling was actually a sort of a separate concept that aligned with the other. And so we merged them. I think we've got a little bit of mixing in this particular language here. We have an information need or a product need, and then we have a hint at an approach to get there. So we've got, this is actually nudging towards a project idea. But really it's the concept. So do we, to get where we want to go, to improve fish and fisheries, would it help us to understand how these different management actions interact and better understand where we have uncertainty. I think that's just another way to think about the concept. Other questions on this one before we move on to the next?
I was just gonna say, it's probably time to move on.
I was saying, just real quickly, the risk that I see, Steve, isn't to extinction, it's the risk to genetic change, which relates to the ESA and the requirement to make sure that distinct population segments aren't affected.
Lance, you had your hand up.
Yeah, this latest discussion, thanks, Selena, for that. That's helpful to kind of clarify in my mind, because right now it just seems so broad. It's not nailed down in any one aspect. So it seems like it's just a concept that we might want to use to nail down on any of the objectives that we might pursue, correct?
Yeah. And I think, I would have argued that this should have been done before we even started doing research at the Hatchery Center, but that's my own bias. It's kind of a prognostic evaluation of what needs to be done to reach your objective. And,
Okay.
And now is actually in a lot of ways a good time to do it, because we have got some research done. We have identified some specific areas that need more work. And this is a good time to bring that together into, a modeling framework that can help us evaluate costs and benefits of what we should do moving forward.
So it could look at the effects of hatcheries on wild populations, or it could look at the effects of different hatchery rearing strategies on a particular outcome. So that it's really broad in just the concept or the tool in the toolbox.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
One might
Great,
use
thanks.
a Bayesian neural network approach to evaluate this, right? That incorporates uncertainty and all of those different levers and nodes that affect the ultimate outcome. How well is our fishery performing? How well are we mitigating risk? Let's move on to the next one. If we have time, we can circle back or work further down in the list. I'll just remind everyone that that top one, Selena wasn't alone in thinking that this is a good idea. It rose to the top by a wide margin.
So,
Mark, the views of the participants, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to let everybody know, I'm really sorry I have to jump. I'm giving a full university address in about half an hour, and I need to go do the tech check for that. It's University Day here, and I'm Faculty Senate President. So I'm really sorry I have to run, because this is a great conversation, and I really am hoping that we can identify ways to move forward together. I've given Mark a little bit of information to share with you about the search for the director, and I look forward to working with all of you more as we get that interview going. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Selena.
Thanks, Selena.
Thank you.
So maybe working our way through the list here for the sake of time. We have the second concept asking what traits are under selection in hatcheries and what aspects of hatchery culture could be modified to mitigate that selection. So this is really the concept that underpins Dr. Bluin's research. But the participants at the workshop viewed this as second to one, really toward the top of all and we had over 30 concepts brought forward initially. This ranked second in their view. Questions here? Or maybe Brad or Carl, you could share some of the views that came forward during your breakout groups.
Yeah, I think the reason, I'm sorry, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, so in our group, it was pretty unanimous that they weren't sure. I mean, they all thought that, and this is delinked from Dr. Bluin's domestication study. This is just a standalone question: what traits are under selection, and should OHRC participate in that? That's the way we approached it. And the sense from my breakout group was that you need to study only heritable traits. You need to study whether those traits are under selection. You need to study whether those heritable traits that are under selection then affect fitness. And in the sense, and this is not my words, this is from scientists, said that probably that process would take 300 years. And while it's neat science, it's probably not actionable. Whatever you come up with from this study probably could not be implemented. So that was kind of the essence. But again, it wasn't a judgment on Dr. Bluen's study. This was a standalone discussion about should OHRC be studying this aspect.
Carl, you had some comments?
Yeah, there were a fair number of studies that all sort of fit under this broader concept. And so our group also felt unanimously that this was a very important thing to do. Again, this is the concept, and it's including Michael Bluen's study as part of this. There were, I can't remember how many, but maybe 4 or 5 or 6 other concepts that were lumped under this. So there's lots of different ways to approach in different parts that need to be done.
These sauces.
I also think that with regard to solving the issue of making sure there's no negative effects of hatchery fish if they spawn with wild fish, it's a very hard nut to crack, and there has to be some risk taking in terms of the research. And I think this is something that this particular project would have a high payoff if it worked.
And from what I heard from the workshop participants, is that there's just simply a very strong alignment between the OHRC's mission and understanding what are the mechanisms that generate differences between hatchery and wild fish. This is what the center needs to do. Questions from folks?
I'm a little confused based on Brad's statement. It's important, but very difficult to achieve. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, I mean, and again, I was just taking notes, Steve. I wasn't contributing to that conversation. And the feeling was, Matt said, gosh, something like this would take 300 years. And even when you're done, it probably could not be implemented.
Yeah.
And we're talking about applied science, not just necessarily nice science.
Yeah.
My group didn't have that impression, Steve.
Oh,
but again, there's a big risk of not being able to, not finding a positive result.
Right.
You don't know until you try. We're talking about a long-term study.
So I'm kind of confused. I understand the importance, and I really truly appreciate that, but it's kind of confusing why it rose to the top if people think we couldn't answer the question, I guess.
Yeah, those votes didn't come from my group. there were 30 participants in that. So
we had geneticists in our group, and it didn't come from our group either, Steve.
Okay.
But again, we're dealing with multiple generations of fish. So it's long term to get to the yes or no answer.
So you'll still be working, Carl, when we get the answer. Sounds like.
I'm not working. I'm not getting paid.
Well, you're still working.
Let's move on to the third. What are the underlying drivers of public perceptions of hatcheries, and what outreach and education strategies might affect those? This was actually a concept that was generated during the course of the workshop. So we had asked for concepts prior to the workshop. I received those, assembled them, and then presented them to the group. This one emerged during the course of the workshop. So this is really about outreach and education, and are we communicating hatchery science well to the public? Carl, thoughts from your group on this?
Yeah, it's really that the public has to understand the importance of hatcheries and hatchery fish, and they also have to understand the importance of wild fish. And so it's to really make sure, because we seem to have people that fall into camps, and neither camp is listening to the logic of the other camp. There has to be better communication.
I agree, Mark. For me, this would probably rise to number one. I mentioned years ago that it's all about building the brand, the brand of OHRC. And like my business partner used to always say, perception is reality. So whatever perception people have, that is their reality. So anything we can do to communicate the brand at OHRC to the public is of phenomenal importance. It has zero to do with understanding the differences between hatchery origin and natural origin fish, but that I think it still is very critical to consider.
Can I say something?
Well, yeah, go ahead, Ted.
I think we should go to the sporting shows when we ever get rid of this virus, and rent a booth and at these major shows and put our people there. Our people are wonderful, and the flyers that you guys have made in the last couple of years have been just terrific. This last one that I got, wonderfully done. I just think we just need a little campaigning out there.
Thanks, Ted. Andrew,
So I think that's a great idea, Ted. And what this concept really, I think, is promoting is that we need research to identify how do we best spend our resources, our time, getting our message out and talking about hatcheries. Maybe it is at the sports shows. Maybe it's through website developments. We want to how we spend our time and resources because they're limited. And so let's identify our most effective approaches. And then Andrew, I see you have your hand up for some time.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I was just curious, this particular one seems to have a real social science focus, which from what I know is, different than what the research center has typically been focused on. And so is there, and maybe this is getting ahead of things a little bit, but does the center have the right resources and expertise to pursue a social science study like this, or would we go outside of current folks working on center projects to try and find someone or some resources that could pursue a social science study like this? Just interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I agree. This is a social science oriented concept. And I also view that as a bit different from the other concepts or anything that we've done. As a group, the facilitators of the workshop and I, we talked about or discussed whether or not we should just throw this in the mix or keep it as something separate. And I think we came to the agreement that it made sense to just keep it in there and treat it as any other concept. So if all advise me to include this concept in the RFP, well, then we request proposals that might address this concept. And those proposals would, I assume, come from social scientists or groups that include social scientists. And then we evaluate those research proposals on their merit and promise to produce us with the results that we're looking for.
Just so everybody knows, the Co-op Fish and Wildlife Research Unit that Jim Peterson now leads and that I used to be the leader of is hiring a science communicator as an assistant leader. So that'll be an assistant professor position in science communication to the public. And that'll be in place probably around the holidays.
Excellent, excellent.
I got a point there that, ever since the board was formed, we've had a public outreach committees and we've come up with talking points and we've talked with different groups. But if you're worried about the public perception, I mean, on hatcheries, almost every paper that comes out of OSU and stuff out of ODFW starts out saying that hatchery fish are inferior. They're detrimental effects. And a lot of people read those things. And we got to get back to what Brad talked about in the very beginning. I mean, we have to have these hatcheries. Hatcheries are good and we need to make them better. But that's not the perception that comes out from the abstract almost every one of these studies you read coming out of Oregon.
Right, Scott, thanks. So this concept gets right at your concern. So how do we improve our messaging?
Can I say something?
Sure, Ted. And then I think we need to move on to the next one because we are going to shift gears a little bit at 10:30.
Okay, I'll do a quickie. I go to the biggest places with the most amount of people and just put it out there. Our people at our research center are wonderful. They could just hit a home run.
Okay, thanks, Ted. Can genomics tell us how concerned we should be about hatchery-induced genetic change? So genetic tools have improved rapidly and substantially in the past decade. We can now scan genomes at a cost that was unimaginable a decade ago. These tools could be applied to better understand the level of difference between hatchery and wild fish, like we've never been able to do before. Is it time to revisit the question of how different are hatchery and wild fish? Perhaps we have overestimated those differences in the past, and new tools would show us that. Core to this concept was that we could probably address this through collaborative multi-lab approaches. So questions on can genomics tell us how concerned we should be? Thoughts from Carl, Brad, Kathleen, I see you there too. We'd love to hear from you. You were very engaged in the workshop. Any thoughts you might share?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, this concept was proposed by Mike Ford at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center, and I think you summed it up quite well. The idea here is this is what Mike proposes, the current risk assessment approach. Is it too conservative? It might be. And also, as you identified, this is very suitable for collaboration. So there's already projects ongoing by some of my colleagues in Alaska and in Washington. And so I think there's an opportunity to maybe figure out what projects are ongoing, where are the gaps, and then maybe add one or two studies to kind of complete that. Mike Bluen might want to say something as well. I believe he has a study. I think he's initiated one. So if he's available, wants to comment.
Yeah, I presented some data. We've been doing this for a couple of years, using genomics approaches to compare hatchery and wild fish from multiple different watersheds, all in steelhead, with the idea of trying to figure out, if we could figure out what genomic regions they differ at, that might point us to the traits under selection. So we have several data sets, mostly unpublished, that we can contribute to this effort, and there's obviously scope to do more. But like Kathleen said, there are other groups starting to ask similar questions. So I think it's a good time to potentially see what all these different studies are coming up with.
Thanks, Mike. Questions?
The other big advantage of this would be, it would really help define what these distinct population segments are that all the ESA listings are based on. Because right now there's a fair amount of possibility that the classification of these ESAs, or not ESAs, of the ESUs are incorrect.
Carl, that's an interesting point. This is Kathleen here. I guess I'll add to that. I'm not sure if you're aware of NOAA's recent ruling on the petition to list spring Chinook on the Oregon coast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, they actually decided to keep the ESUs as currently listed and not restructure them based on variation at specific chromosome regions related to run timing. So there's potentially different movements going down on in California, but as of now, based on NOAA's recent decision last month, things are going to remain the same.
Yeah, I remember the upriver, Columbia River steelhead changes if you include the Hood River population or not. So is the Hood River part of the upper or the lower Columbia River? That changes what the whole mix looks like.
Lindsay Ball, we'd love to hear from you. Questions on any of these comments or concepts so far?
Well, I would, let me say this. I think we're trying to make this more complicated than what it really is. I think I think what we're doing is we're kind of running and leaving some really good things that we've done behind us and not really taking those with us. Think about that. We're almost to the point where I think we're a little fearful of what we've accomplished. We've done some great things. And each and every one of us can pull some of those out of our back pocket and say, this is what we've done. And let's be bold enough to say, this is the next step. What next step do you want to take that we haven't already taken? Think of it that way.
Right. Thanks, Lindsay.
It's there. We've done great work.
Words to consider. Do hatchery fish mated in ways that emulate wildlife mate choice pose less fitness risk? This is, as Lindsay points out, we've been doing some great work at the OHRC. And this is the concept that underpins Dr. Banks' work. This isn't his research proposal. This is the concept. This is information that participants recognize as important to know to improve our fish and fisheries. Carl, your thoughts or those from your group?
It really gets at the next step, Lindsay. So this is, like Mark said, Michael Banks's concept of his research, and it needs to go on with a few more generations to answer yes or no. And the same is true for the first one as well, and with Michael Bluen's study. And there's different parts to that need to be done. So it's not leaving behind, but building on, I guess is a way of saying it.
That's the issue at hand. We've learned. We're going to learn some more. We're going to learn something else that we didn't happen to see right away. And for heaven's sakes, we shouldn't think of ourselves as anything but the best scientists and biologists that we can put together. I would challenge anyone to be able to outdo what we've accomplished here in Oregon.
Yeah.
And we have more questions to be answered, but let's don't shame ourselves into thinking we haven't done a really good job, because we have.
No, spot on, Lindsay.
Mm-hmm. I agree. We're just working to get better yet.
Yes.
So I think a lot of these ideas were things that were thought of in the very beginning by the researchers that we have. They just need to be done sequentially. And so this is what's next.
Yeah, Mark, I'm just going to concur with what Carl and Lindsay and you have said as far as using Dr. Banks's study now as the foundation to the next step. I think there was widespread agreement in my breakout group that mate choice, certainly with Carlos Garza from the Santa Cruz research facility and his work on inbreeding, that mate choice is extremely important. Certainly that's where I come down as far as maybe the key determinant of fitness differences between hatchery origin and natural origin fish. So with its importance, I would definitely like to see it included in this group to go on to find out that proposal. And maybe the proposal will come from Dr. Banks on what that next step is. And I could heartily support that. But yeah, we need to get to that point for sure. He's done a great job of leading us to where we can emulate, wild mate choice selection, which is awesome. And clearly now the next step has to be taken.
Thanks, Brad.
I've run this concept by Lyle Curtis and Jim Pex and some scientists and biologists, and they all think this is a real worthy one.
Thanks, Scott. We have more here on the list, and all of these are included on a poll that I'm going to ask board members to ask you to participate in. in about 10 minutes. I'll offer you a link for that, and we'll sort of talk about how it works before we dive into it. But before we cover these last three, which I hope we have time to do, I want to ask board members, are we missing anything? Are there high priority research concepts that aren't on this list that you'd like to see on the list?
Yeah, I have one.
Sure, Scott.
As I've been, brought up many times before, I'm concerned about a way to measure risk. And, I've heard a lot of, we had Jim Peterson talk about it for a couple hours of how difficult it is to measure the risk. But there's studies out there now you can read by Maureen Hess, one of them. This is studies. In fact, I got it right here somewhere. It says factors that, oh, excuse me, wrong one. Here it says supportive breeding boosts natural population abundance with minimal negative impacts on fitness of wild population of Chinook salmon. So there's reports, scientific reports that say minimal effects, minimal risk, and there's studies that say acceptable risk or risk is too great. But how is this risk measured? And I realize, the difficulty in setting up a RRS number or a PHOS number, but there's all these studies out there that have already been done by scientists, and very reputable studies, a lot by the tribes in Idaho and some in Oregon and whatever, that the studies are already there. Some say minimal risk, some say small risk, acceptable risk. Maybe if we had some unbiased scientists gather together all the reports that are already done and kind of come up with some scale of or measure of what they call minimal or what they call acceptable. But right now we don't really have anything.
So your concept is, your research concept would be to develop what I'm hearing from you actually aligns pretty closely with the genomics. Can genomics tell us how concerned we should be about hatchery-induced genetic change? That is
yeah.
Are we assessing risk in the right way? That is my concept.
My idea would be to gather the research that has been done already that claims minimal risk or too high a risk or whatnot, and some unbiased science look at that, look at the background. I mean, what brood stock were used, what hatchery stock were used, what conditions of release of smolt and the timing of release, and all the different factors put together that decided whether it's minimal risk or acceptable risk or too high a risk. But right now we see these different studies, but they're done in very different kind of backgrounds, and we're supposed to, OHRC supposed to minimize risk, but minimize it from where to where, we don't have any idea. But other people have come up with things that's minimal risk. So what is the minimal risk? And under what conditions? I mean, if we're using wild brood stock, if we're using incubation boxes, if we're doing certain supplementation techniques through hatcheries, risk is minimal. Let's go balls to the wall with it. And that's what we need to look at.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is something akin to this. What factors most contribute to hatchery risk? Does that capture?
Yeah, that's close.
I see this fitting very well also with the very first concept here.
I would agree with you, Carl.
But that's exactly, when I think of the PVA approach, that's exactly what this takes into account. It depends on how big is the wild population, how big is the hatchery population, how different is the hatchery population from the wild population. The trouble with words like minimal and high risk and no risk is they're all so subjective. There's no definition of those words. it just really depends. Are you a splitter or are you a lumper?
Hey,
Something.
I'm going to jump in and let Andrew have the floor here. And Andrew, you humble me with your manners, and I guess maybe in the future, if you've got a comment, which are all valuable, just go ahead and insert them like all of us do. I feel a little guilty seeing that hand raised, but go ahead, buddy. You've got the floor. May need to unmute yourself though.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the discussion, Scott and Carl. Sorry to cut you short, and Brad, thanks for the attention. I've done enough Zoom now, just learn to be patient with the hand raise. So I'll jump in the future. But I didn't have an additional research idea, more just a question before we go into the poll, the ranking. And I see that Sean's, I don't think, here with us today. So I guess maybe question for Mark, and I see Scott Patterson's here, but wondering, given that, as I understand, a core function of the center is to report the research findings back to ODFW to make management policy decisions. Are there one or more of these concepts that sort of rise to the top from ODFW's perspective regarding information that they need for those management decisions? Or I kind of missed your list of attendees at the workshop in the beginning, Mark. Maybe those preferences are kind of baked into the list that we have here, but just wanted to see if there was anything from ODFW's perspective that might be particularly important relative to other concepts.
Sure, Andrew, it's a good question. So I flip back to the slide, which identifies the workshop participants and their affiliations. And the green block there includes folks from the OHRC and Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. So I suppose, in a sense, the poll results do include the views of not everyone in the department, of course, but representation of ODFW. Yeah. We had folks from, again, from the tribes, from NGOs, federal agencies, the state, several universities, and participation was engaged, very engaged, as it is here today. This is a great discussion. Scott, I have added your research concept to the poll, so we'll be able to gauge support from other folks here on the board with respect to all the other concepts. So thank you.
I have one more that maybe you or Carl can tell me it may have already been done to some extent, but that's a smolt migration timing. I've been talking to Lyle Curtis and some work that he'd done in the past, and he said that when smolt migrate, they don't migrate all at once, like when we dump them out of a hatchery, but naturally, some they go out at different times and even different years. And perhaps that has something to do with their fitness and survival and genetic selection and everything. I wonder what kind of studies have been done on smolt migration timing and what we could do. I mean, he even had ideas of like a hatchery setup where the smolt, when they want to move, they jump into water, and maybe a hatchery could be set up where they jump into flowing water and set their own timing for release rather than just be forced out at certain times. And maybe there's some selection involved there. And I wonder if studies have been done or could be done to take a look at that.
Well, I'll help in that's a perfect segue, Scott, because that is the very next concept on the list here. How can we adapt hatchery breeding strategies to deal with climate change? And so it might not come out completely in the way this is written here, but that's exactly what we're talking about. Do we need to vary smolt release timings so that hatchery fish can get out to the ocean at the best time, because conditions are changing, and bet hedging strategies, right, may be the best way to learn about when we should be releasing those fish, and maybe we should be releasing them at a number of different times. So that's
develop a way
this concept.
Develop a way that they could be released on their own, when they decide it's time rather than we decide it's time.
Yeah, volitional outmigration, sure.
Scott, your idea fits exactly with this last one on maintenance of life history variation. That's exactly where that's coming from. And there's been tons of studies, but we're still just scratching the surface and understanding this. It's extremely complex. And I think as the habitat has changed and as management has changed, we've sort of limited this expression of life history variation. And my main concern in conservation here is to make sure we maintain the capacity to express this variation. Maybe that populations don't need to express it at a certain time, but they have to have the capacity to express it. In the Columbia River, there's smolts migrating every month of the year. In the Rogue River, there's huge differences over time with different peaks of migration to the ocean and different survivorship of those. In certain years, certain peaks survive better than other peaks. So we're just beginning to understand this. There has been a fair amount of research done with what you're suggesting, sort of jumping into downstream flowing water and that sort of stuff. And it's very closely timed to smolting, but the trouble is, how do you produce that smolt? And that makes such a huge difference. Something we could talk about down the road if you want to.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important information for us. I want to touch on a couple of these others, and then I'm going to open up the poll so that board members can express, let us know what you think about these different concepts.
Just one last thing on that. There used to be an annual workshop on this that was on the West Coast. Now there's an international workshop that's on this, happens every 4 years. And I hosted one of these about 10 years back that was held at the OHRC to get at exactly this. What do we understand about juvenile variation? How do hatchery fish perform? What can we do better, and so forth? And they're all published in the Journal of Aquaculture or Journal of Fish Biology, results of all the workshops.
Thanks, Carl. And are there questions from other board members about this concept of adapting hatchery release strategies, investigating how different release strategies might affect performance, adult returns, demographics? Questions?
I don't have a question, but more of a comment that this is kind of something that interests me and the tribe I work for, just in our winter steelhead program we have here, where we are kind of looking at different release timings to see, if that brings more adults back. So that this one kind of really interests me.
Thanks, Travis. Second from the bottom, what are the post-release effects of hatchery fish on wild population demographics and genetics?
So the question, Mark, that came up in my breakout group on that particular one was, this refers to the marine life stage of the fish, and there's just no way that we can study the selection in the ocean for survival. So I guess I would be wildly interested in if this does get to go to the next stage. If we get proposals, I'd be very interested in that abstract on how we can measure selection in the ocean.
Yes, it's Tom out there. I agree with that one too.
Salmon ocean ecology is a big field with big questions, and certainly a difficult environment to sample, but we do it. Carl, your thoughts there?
Yes. You're exactly right, Mark. It's a very important question. Very, very tough to get at. And one of the concepts that's sort of incorporated here was what effects of hatcheries are played out after they're released from the hatcheries and get out into the ocean. So understanding the lag effects rather than sort of the immediate effects or the effects on the spawning ground, but either ocean entry or the need to use the estuary for a while, those sorts of things, very hard to get at.
And let's just jump to the last one. Can supportive breeding programs maintain or restore life history variation in populations? A little bit of background here. Maybe we talk about the phenotype, what a fish looks like. That is the product of genetics, environment, and the interaction of the two. So using different stocks and looking at different stocks, can we safeguard diversity and actually have that diversity expressed through varying the environment in the hatchery or using different rearing and release strategies. That's what my group understood from this concept. Thoughts from your group, Brad?
Mark, I don't have anything to add. I obviously think that's a very important topic. Getting back to my introduction today about maybe a legitimate goal to create the absolute best hatchery fish we can. Obviously, this would inform that.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to maybe turn the gavel over to you, Brad, and if you could continue the discussion. I'm going to share the link to the poll with the board members that we have here in the room. Please, when you go to this polling site, this is a website, you should just be able to click on the link and it'll open in a browser. You'll have up 5 votes, and you can vote on, they're not really votes, mind you. You can express your support. This isn't a vote, but it's a poll where we're just going to gather and survey your information. And so you can express your support for multiple concepts by filling out the poll. So the instructions are here. You'll see them. I'm going to send a link out to each of you.
So Mark, this is a bit different than what you and I talked about yesterday. My notes here show that basically we were just going to come to this point of the agenda and ask them to raise their hands if they support this or not, and have maybe Carrie count the hands. So this poll, I guess, is a little bit different than doing that, correct?
Oh, I maybe we had a disconnect on communication, Brad, and I apologize if that's the case. I do have this set up for the top 8 concepts, and
so help me understand. Then are we Hey, Chuck, turn your mic off. So are we prioritizing
concepts based on this discussion and including the information that we got from the workshop, which includes the ranking of the concepts per the views of workshop participants.
So this is not just a yes or no, that we support these to go to the next stage, that some of these may be culled based on that poll?
Some of these may be culled because I think what we have here is a list. We have too many concepts to include it.
Got it. Okay.
We can't kid ourselves into believing that we could possibly fund 8 different projects.
Okay, so a very important prioritization step then is about to face us. And while Mark bails out to set up the poll, gosh, you guys, this can be just a free-flowing discussion right now. I mean, as far as anything or everything that we've talked about today, I think the poll probably will be self-explanatory when Mark comes back to us. It's similar to what we did in the workshops. And honestly, congratulations to Mark. It just worked seamlessly. I mean, it was remarkable how well that poll worked. But before we get to that, are there any comments for the good of all of us that will help inform how we prioritize these concepts?
Yeah, Brad, if I could, a couple of comments. I really liked earlier discussion on building blocks of future research based on past research that Lindsay emphasized. And it seemed to me there was a couple of candidates there that were real clear in doing that. I'd like to know from the larger group if that's right, since I'm relatively new. The traits under selection, a lot of work done on that. And then the mate choice and fitness, those seem like 2 highlights that build upon previous research. Is my understanding kind of correct in that?
Spot on. Yep.
Okay.
So you should all be one by one receiving a link to the poll. Chuck, Lindsay, Scott, I believe you have a link there and should be able to start that. As you're filling out the poll, keep the OHRC's mission in mind, right? What are we here to do? understand the mechanisms that generate differences between hatchery and wild fish, and investigate methods to mitigate those differences.
Correct, Mark, that there's 5 votes or 5 selections a person can make, but you can't put more than 3 on any particular one, or you can spread all 5 out over 5 different concepts.
Given the size of the group, Carl, the math adjusts a little here, so it's 2 per, yeah, so it spreads it out a bit more. That changes with the size of the group, and there's a little bit of math behind that.
Mark, is this going out only to the voting members of the board or to all members of the board?
So because this is not a vote, I'm sending it out to OHR, all board members. And
yes, good.
I'll let you all know when I believe I've sent it to everyone. I'm working as fast as I can. When I tell you, if you haven't received it, when I believe that everyone has received it, then please.
I'm not seeing anything. What are we supposed to see?
Who's speaking, please?
It's Tom. Okay. What am I? I'm not.
Hi, Tom. I'll send you a note in the chat room right now.
Go down to your chat rooms, guys.
When I click on where it says chat.
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Let's see.
And there should be a link there. You should be able to click on that link, and I might send this to some of you in duplicate because I'm tracking a lot here. Does anyone that believes they should have received this? Well, I believe I've sent this to everyone now.
No, I don't have it, Mark.
Anything.
Okay, let me send it to you, Brad. Thank you. And that should be showing up in your chat now.
Just did, yes. Yep, just got it.
Oh, there's concepts. Okay. Okay, there we go.
So you see that you can indicate your level of support for concepts by filling in the dots to the right of that concept. So we have a list of all those concepts. Scott, including my best effort at capturing your language, and I think it's probably showing up as the last one. So you can fill in a total of 5 dots with up to 2 dots for any one concept. And there's no need to hit enter or submit. That is all recorded real time here.
I'm not clear on how do you ascertain where your priority is on it. I mean, some of them I like better than others, right? So
sure. So you can fill out 2 dots for those that you like better, or 1 dot for those that you're best.
How many dots?
Yes. Okay. This is a form of dotmocracy.
Wow. Which side of these dots we punch? This side here?
Ted, are you able to? Is there anyone who hasn't?
I'm trying to figure it out here. Which one of these?
These are your dots.
Okay, so I just push
1, 0, 1, or 2 for how important you think it is.
Well, I've been touching and nothing's happening.
Oh.
Hey, Mark, I don't think I got it.
Okay, Steve, let me get that to you. Sorry.
Why don't we send something out on this later instead of trying to fool with it now?
I put a dot and then says, who are you? And you have to put in your name. And is that what I put on?
Here, Steve.
I got it.
So what we should get from this, we should be able to rank these concepts.
Tell them you need a login for the poll unit.
We need a login for the poll unit. This Ted.
Hi, Ted.
Login for the poll unit?
No.
Yes. Just you should be able to enter your name.
We did.
We did.
And then pick sign in as guest, and then it'll throw you right in there.
How do you go back?
Sign up.
Just sign in as guest. Yeah.
Clear on that.
And my recollection is, Mark, you don't need to hit any kind of a submit button. That once you voted, it automatically goes to you. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we can see the results at the time.
Yeah.
So we tap on the 0 or here.
Tap on whichever ones you're voting for, honey.
Hey, and I would say if anyone's having trouble with the software, we can take a look. We can just take a look through the concepts, and you can tell us how you would.
Yeah, I can just tell you the 3 that I'm most interested in.
Okay.
I'm not sure I've got all that right with the software.
I can probably just use my own name, and I can represent you here by proxy, Tom.
Okay, are you? Is that okay? This is Tom here. Can I talk? Here's the top 3 that I like. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The one that says the one on the what are the post-release effects of the hatchery fish on wild population? That'd be number 1 for me. Number 2 would be the one on the how can we adapt hatchery rearing strategies on the climate change. And then the 3rd one would be at the one at the top, the one on the strategies.
Okay. So I've given the first 2 that you listed 2 dots, and the last one got 1 dot. Is that how you do that?
Yeah, that's how I do it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Brad, sometime during the meeting today, we should take up Jen's chat room comment.
Yeah, Carl, absolutely. And maybe, I'm not sure the best person to do that, either you or Mark, probably. Yeah, that's phenomenally important. When I went down there to meet with Mark, it actually made me feel good when I saw that presentation there in front of that room. So maybe Mark can give that the respect that it's due, for sure. Good suggestion, Carl.
If we had a little more time, I would play it right now. But you know, we have. In fact, we might have enough time. Would you like me to pull that up?
Yes, certainly.
And then I think maybe while that's running, do folks need more time with the poll? Does anyone need more time with the poll?
I'd like to follow his vote. The last guy that voted, he was spot on. This is Ted.
Okay, Ted.
You know, all the ones I liked.
Okay.
Thanks, Ted.
Okay, I'll see what I can do and see if I can't bring up the video. I'm gonna let the poll run for another minute unless anyone needs more time. Does anyone need more time?
I think we're good, Mark.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna close the poll then. Where it ended up, how can we adapt hatchery rearing strategies? So how can we adapt hatchery rearing strategies to deal with climate change and adjust release schedules? Scoring at the top. Second, what traits are under selection? And third, what are the underlying drivers? I'm not sure. I've got to take a look at this, and maybe I'll do that while the video's running to incorporate your votes and make sure that it stays the same there, Ted. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a moment. I'd be interested to hear how your thoughts. Did folks like this polling approach? Is this something we should use if we continue to be stuck in our virtual world here, or was that not your favorite?
Mark, this Chuck.
Hi, Chuck.
I would like to have your questions in hand, just to read something on a screen and then come back to it. It's really difficult. If I had it, I would have had it before the meeting even started. I would have had my choices made and given it a lot of thought. Now I can see, I say, oh, wait a minute, this here one was better than that one I clicked on before. I think that format would be more accurate and work better. It'd be easier to do. I don't even remember what I clicked on. I only clicked on 4 of them, and I don't remember what they all were because I don't have a paper that shows me.
Oh, thanks, Chuck. And these are the same concepts that I sent you on Friday, of course, but I appreciate it. It is difficult to work in this virtual environment. So we'll take it.
I don't much care for it either. It's, we start out with all the concepts, we boil them down really quick and try to make a decision and prioritize them this way. Is be better to send it out and have it a little time to look through it and get it back into you the next day or something like that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott, 100%.
So what I'm hearing, Mark, is that there's a lot of us, although I had no trouble with the poll last Friday or today, but it does sound like maybe in this diverse audience here that we've got some old school people, and gosh, it almost seems like the old way of doing things is sending out an email and then asking for them to reply via email, with an attachment might be worth consideration also. Although, again, me personally, I didn't have any trouble with either one of the polls, but.
No, that's what I'm hearing too, Brad. So, and I certainly hope we can all just get ourselves back into the same room as soon as we could safely do that, and that will make all of this a bit unnecessary. So, but we'll look at other approaches like you're suggesting, just to send out information prior to the meeting and give folks time. This was awfully quick turnaround from the workshop that wrapped up on Friday to have these concepts ranked and in front of you today. So it was quite a scramble. I've got the virtual tour, the OHRC that Jen and Craig put together up. You should be able to see that on your screen. And let's take a look at that as I look over some of the poll results, and then I think we can come back together.
Welcome to the Oregon Hatchery Research Center, a state-of-the-art salmon research facility located in the Coast Range of Oregon. The facility was built in 2005 as a partnership between Oregon State University and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and has been at the forefront of salmon research since then. ODFW provides a staff of 3 skilled fish culturists to care for the research animals in the building, facilitating research of all kinds. In the last 16 years, research has looked at all stages of salmon development, including how best to incubate eggs, how to sterilize fish for stocking in lakes, how fish navigate the streams and oceans, how adults choose mates, and how to grow fish that are more like wild fish and less like traditional hatchery fish. Staff at the OHRC care for the research fish and work with project leaders to design and build apparatus and projects that answer the research questions. There's a full shop on site, and staff are comfortable with fabricating out of wood, metal, and plastic. If a request is more than can be feasibly done at the facility, there are several local fabricators in metal and plastic that have been utilized in the past. To help facilitate these and other projects, the facility includes a dedicated wet lab, dry lab, and outdoor space to allow researchers to design a project that will answer their questions. As the facility is located 1 hour from Corvallis and Newport, there are dorms on site, a kitchen, and a nearby caterer. There are also meeting rooms and research offices to give places for discussions and planning. The dry lab is designed to be stocked with the chemicals and equipment needed to do projects. The cabinets are labeled, and staff are able to order any additional items needed. The space includes several freezers, a deionized water station, and a fume hood. The wet lab is a modular space. There are 5 Canadian troughs that can be brought in for rearing fish, several shallow troughs and picking troughs, multiple 2-foot and 3-foot circular tanks, and 6 heath stacks for rearing eggs. There are also 12 observation tanks that can be flow through or recirculating. In the winter, water can be sourced from Carnes Creek and or Fall Creek, and in the summer, it comes from Fall Creek. Water can be delivered at the ambient creek temperature, chilled or heated as requested. The space can be emptied completely to allow for addition of other apparatus such as behavior arenas, small electromagnetic towers, and Y mazes. All the water for the lab comes into the building through the water process room. Here, water can be filtered through a drum filter, treated with UV light and or heated or chilled. This is where decisions are made about the water source as well. There are 24 single dorm rooms upstairs, set up in groups of 2, 3, or 4. Each group shares a bathroom. There's also a large common room with a shared kitchen. Food and bedding are not provided, but there are 2 stoves and 2 refrigerator freezers available, as well as cookware and dishes. The facility also has a full laundry room available. Outside, there are circular tanks of various sizes. There are 7 12-foot, 28 6-foot, 5 4-foot, and 18 3-foot circulars. The water for these tanks come from Fall Creek year-round. There are also 4 raceways that can be utilized for large groups of fish. Staff are on site year-round to care for fish and respond in case of emergency. In the tank farm, there is a large electromagnet that can be used to create specific magnetic fields. A single large tank can be placed inside the electromagnet to test large fish, or multiple buckets can be used for replication. Another of the unique systems at OHRC are the simulated streams. These 4 streams are designed to be replicates of one another, and the layout can be manipulated as needed. Past research has included adult spawning locations, macroinvertebrate composition, flow around woody debris, and fish movement past barriers. The streams can be equipped with wireless cameras and have utilized pit tag readers in the past. Fall Creek is a wild fish only stream, so there is a fish ladder and fish trap to remove any hatchery strays from the creek and to quantify the number, species, and size of fish returning to the creek. Each fish handled has a fin punch taken for genetics and isotopic analysis. All water for the facility that comes from Fall Creek enters via the intake. As the water is used as it comes from the creek, there is a potential for pathogens to enter experiments, particularly during the summer. Staff is trained in identifying and treating for various bacterial and parasitic organisms. ODFW has a fish pathologist and veterinarian on staff that is available 7 days a week to help prescribe treatments and verify staff observations. Research at the OHRC can fall under two categories: applied research and strategic research. Strategic research is your more traditional large projects. Applied research is looking at things that directly will affect hatchery practices. Any work done at the facility needs to meet the mission. There are three parts to the mission. First, to understand the mechanisms that create differences between wild and hatchery salmon and steelhead. Second, to develop approaches to best manage these differences to help meet fishery and conservation objectives. And third, to help Oregonians understand the role and performance of hatcheries in supporting and protecting Oregon's native fish. For more information, please visit our website.
Okay, folks, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here.
So I think Carl's comment directly referred to Jen's chat that the renaming of our conference room in honor of David is almost complete. I think he wanted, correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, I think he wanted that on record, correct?
That's right, Brad.
Okay, thanks, Carl and Brad. I'm looking for the best way to share these results. They just need one more moment here.
I'd like to echo what Brad had said about how efficient this workshop was run. It was done under extremely tough conditions by distance and timing and people all over the place. And Mark did a marvelous job keeping everything running on track and making this a very, very productive experience for everybody.
And this feeds back into a comment that we had talked about either off the record or on the record, you know, going back maybe a couple of years, about the role of the board. And what we're witnessing, all of us, is a stronger effort on the part of the agency and the institution, that being ODFW and OSU, to bring in the voice of the board and then to listen to what they're saying. So this workshop was all about generating ideas, but again, that wasn't the full population. That we were hopeful that the board would also be able to add some concepts and then basically kind of prioritize those. So a big voice from the board on what goes forward for sure. And yeah, Mark, thanks for all your efforts this past weekend, visualizing the workshop and then executing it.
My pleasure, Brad. I'm glad it went as smoothly as it did. One can never be sure with when we bring in the technology. It's at full screen. I've just about got this ready. What I'm seeing here is that the distribution of support from the board is certainly a little different in a couple of ways from what we saw from workshop participants, those members, in terms of the spread and also which concepts were supported. I think I've got this up now. Okay. I'm going to share my screen again so we can look at just what I'm speaking to here. Oh, I look forward to the day when we can get back together in person. Can everyone see an Excel spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay.
Only with a microscope or a,
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can't zoom that. Why is it not letting me zoom?
I've got some binoculars out in the garage, Mark. I'll go get those so I can take a look at it.
Mm-hmm. I could use the time, Brad. So.
To find my binoculars.
Right. Delete. Yeah. So that's really small. How might we zoom here? Okay, I think we can zoom in here. And now we're too big.
No, that's okay. That's better.
Is that better?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to try to find the happy medium. There we go. Okay, so now you should be able to see the way, so these concepts are ranked in the order as according to support from the workshop participants. There's a little bit of difference if we rank them according to your views. Data, sort on E. They look something like this, backwards. Data, sort. So according to your views, how can we adapt hatchery breeding strategies to deal with climate change and adjust release schedules? This appeared to be the most important concept to this board, followed by how do we, the top ranked from the workshop, the modeling approach, followed by a question about what are the post-release effects of hatchery fish. Maybe we have a little bit of time for discussion or thoughts from the board here about these rankings.
I'm still unclear on the column C and the column D. What does that mean?
Sure. So column C indicates support according to folks from the workshop during the workshop. And there were more people, so there are more, right. The numbers are larger.
Okay.
And column D is ranked support from this board.
Oh. Okay.
So the question now becomes, what do we do with that, since they are varying? I mean, how many concepts do you want to take to the next stage, Mark? I think, like you said, that would be a little bit cumbersome to work with all of them. But I guess my thought is, because certainly most of them were worthy of support either from the workshop or from this board, I'd hate to see any of those that were certainly mutually supported be culled. And I'm not sure, all the way down through, number 7 anyhow, being worthy to go to that next stage. But that's just my thought. I'd love to hear from the board.
Right, and so the way in which we'll structure this request for proposals will indicate any number of these as priority concepts for the Oregon Hatchery Research Center. Then, and we plan to weight those, give preference to those proposals that include collaborative multidisciplinary approaches that are grounded in hatchery operations. So we can receive those proposals and then rank those proposals as they relate to these concepts based on their own merits. So it's it's totally possible and could work that we list 5 or 3. We could list more than that of these research concepts and then ask for proposals that address them. So I'm open to hear your thoughts. Carl, maybe you have some suggestions about the number of research concepts that we might include on an RFP.
I suspect it would be good to have more than too few. I know that's being vague. When you write the RFPs, I'm sure you'll indicate the mission of the OHRC, and then there'll be a bit of explanation about what all these mean. And so there's the possibility of some proposals being very short-term and very inexpensive, but also rank lower here, but they also maybe should be included just for that reason.
Yeah, so I'm just based on that, Mark, I don't know how cumbersome it is for you, but I guess it wouldn't be a bad idea to have all of these concepts submitted for a request for proposal. You may not get proposals on all of them. And then have that culling process just happen organically.
I think this is Kathleen. I'm just going to chime in for a second. I think that's a great suggestion, Brad, because I think you're right. Some of the people that propose these concepts may not even submit a proposal themselves.
Right.
And given the short turnaround time and just the bandwidth that each individual researcher has, they may not have the time to get one in time. So I think you have a good suggestion there.
Thank you.
One possibility, Mark, would be to ask people to submit pre-proposals so that people aren't writing very lengthy proposals for all of these, but have a low probability of getting them funded. And then you can review the pre-proposals and then from that request full proposals for a larger number than you're actually going to fund.
Yeah, no, certainly our RFP will indicate this. A short proposal format is, I think, what we absolutely have to go to given the timeline that we're working with. We need to announce this RFP almost immediately, and then we'll need to review those proposals quickly. So short proposals will be necessary. And what I'm thinking here really is maybe something along the lines of a 5-page format, 3 pages of text outlining question, methods, approach, together with a budget and a schedule.
And maybe a little bit of the background of the laboratories involved.
Agreed.
Seems to me we have 6 of those that are all pretty close in there for the board members, the 10 through 7. It seems to me we could drop out those bottom 3 personally if we had to reduce some.
Well, number 7 though got a great deal of support from the workshop.
No, I would say the 7 will be good. I'm just saying the bottom 3 are, there's not many. There doesn't be much of many votes there. Just a thought.
Well, again, getting back to Kathleen and my thoughts, I'd let that culling process happen organically, Mark.
Yeah, that's true. That's fine too.
I agree with Tom, and it seems like the next letting the RFP process play out, casting a little bit of a wider net, and then the next decision point being based on the merits of the proposals. But I do agree with Tom, and I think Brad, maybe you had proposed this originally, looking at just rows 1 through 7. I agree with Tom's observation that rows 8 and 9 don't seem to have as much support, but.
Thanks, Andrew. And thanks for not raising your hand.
Okay, so the next step is going to be by this board. So how would you like me to proceed?
Oh, wow. So, I'm a little light on Robert's Rules of Orders, Mark. I hope I don't have to ask the board for a vote. Can we get a verbal consensus? Maybe it seems kind of undefined, but
Why not vote?
so
Somebody could make a motion that the 1 through 7 are included in the RFP, yes or no?
So Mark, if we made or Carl, if we made a motion, you wouldn't get to vote. So, I guess maybe just an overall poll, like Mark was talking about initially, verbally, I could say, hey, are we in support of this block? Yes or no? And if the overwhelming preponderance of that support is yes, we don't worry about it. If we hear a couple of no's, then we've accomplished the mission that they all go on. But if we hear more no's, of course, it's imprecise. Somebody else that knows more about polling and voting, jump in here and help me out.
Well, the problem here is that this is public meeting law requirements too. And if there's a vote, people have to know how different members voted. So it has to be made public, but that could be made public in the minutes.
Certainly.
So you could vote the way you're suggesting, and then the minutes could record that.
So Mark,
yeah, no, I agree with your suggestion, Carl. I think this would be an appropriate time for a motion on the number of concepts to be included in the RFP.
So Andrew, do you mind if I burden you with, do you have a thought, or Tom, on what that motion might sound like?
Is there a motion from the floor to take action here?
Yeah, is it a move to accept items 1 through 7 to go on for an RFP? Is that what the motion would sound like?
Yeah, I think that would be a good one.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, so someone other than me make that motion. Just say so moved.
I move that we have 1 through 7 concepts for the board.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there a discussion?
And I think we could vote simply through raise of hands if we're able to get everyone, all voting board members with their cameras on.
Okay, so I'll call for the question and just kind of stick your hand in front of the camera, and I'll ask Carrie to count the hands. All of those in favor of having concepts 1 through 7 go on to the next step of request for proposal, say aye, or raise your hand, actually, so Carrie can count us.
Just heads up, I can't see everyone all at once.
Okay.
Because Mark's got a screen up, so I can't see you all.
Go back to gallery. Go back to gallery, Mark.
Sorry.
I'm in gallery. I can see everyone, so I can count.
Okay, you count.
Okay, but I can't see Ted, so we'll.
All those in favor? All those in
Okay,
favor?
so I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 votes. Ted, is this a yay or a nay from you? We have to unmute. Ted might have stepped away. I believe that passes, and a record of this meeting recorded. So
what happened here?
There's Ted.
Yay, I'm for it.
Good man, Ted.
okay, this is a near unanimous vote in favor. So
okay.
We include the top rows 1 through 7 here. I apologize for the screen sharing. I'm juggling lots of screens here this morning. 1 through 7 to be included in a request for proposals issued from the Oregon Hatchery Research Center.
Perfect. So in the interest of time, Mark, do you mind sharing what December is going to look like? I mean, you've mentioned it early on, what the next step is, request for proposal, November 1, but just kind of walk us through that timeline again, and then what December will look like based on that timeline.
Right. So we'll issue this request for proposals next week. I expect then we'll, I hope, receive proposals from potential researchers. We'll send those proposals out to an independent scientific review panel to get their comments on the merits of those proposals in alignment with the OHRC mission. Then I will send all of those proposals along with the review comments to you, the members of this board. You'll have an opportunity to review the proposals, the comments, and then in December, you can make the decision through vote as to which of those you would recommend for funding. And that should, so that'll be in December. And then we should be able to move forward with that process of funding and contracting in January. Carl, you bring up some good points about the length of proposals and pre-proposals and fleshing out full proposals. In my view, the fleshing out of the full proposals will be done through the course of developing statements of work. So we can get a pre-proposal reviewed, get this board to weigh in on those pre-proposals or those short proposals, and then flesh out the details in work statements.
And then last request, Mark, since before we go on to the last item on the agenda, if you wouldn't mind putting us back in gallery view so we can see, so each of us can see everybody. And
yes.
And Carrie, I know we don't submit minutes until very close to the next board meeting, which is strategic, so that we can review those minutes before we have to vote on their approval. But I guess I would ask that some kind of a recap of this vote that we just did does go out to the board. It doesn't have to be a full-blown minutes at all, but just to remind us that we all have that in front of us. Thank you. So, but
yeah, and Brad, just to comment on that. So we voted all those in favor. If there's any of the board members that want to oppose, that should probably be a part of the record as well, giving them the opportunity to do that.
I agree, Lance. Could we have anyone who opposed to that vote say nay?
Nay.
Thank you, Scott.
Important point, Lance. Thank you for that. I see, and again, I'm a little light on the Robert's rules, so thanks for keeping me honest on that one. Apologize for that. Any last comments on this whole research process before we move on to the last agenda item? There is one more agenda item. Any other last comments?
I just had a quick question. How much funding are we talking about to allocate for these?
Right. So we have reserved about 400,000.
Okay.
I guess I would just echo, I think, Brad, your comments while Mark was tallying results. Just want to express again, thanks to Mark and staff and others who participate in the workshop and today's meeting. It's a big lift and sounds like it was a great success. And so thanks for all the information and walking us through everything today, and appreciate the discussion.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, Mark, was the 400,000 for a biennium or total?
Biennium. So that is what we've already committed about a little over half of our projection. So the difference is about 400,000. Scott, does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. So these would extend into 23, 25.
21, 23.
And so they have, so it's really a 1 year or 18-month ordeal.
That's right.
Okay.
So we're diving into a spinning carousel here. So the buying time is marching on as we develop this process. So part of the biennium is already burned. So we'll be evaluating proposals that will start probably in January, and so they'll run, I would guess, a year and 6 months, something like that.
So maybe I'm just naive, but that seems awful quick to recruit and get the work done. But I trust you.
We're moving fast.
I think many of these proposals will be more than one biennium.
Yes, sure.
I would expect that. Yes.
Any final comments? So I did get a phone call from one of our board members late last week asking for an opportunity to share some thoughts at the end of our board meeting today. So with all respect to that, I'm going to ask Scott Starkey to talk about a meeting that he and his group had with ODFW and OSU last week. Scott, the floor is yours, buddy.
After you hear what I have to say, you probably understand more why I had some issues with this process today. On Friday, last Friday on the 10th from 4 to 5:30 p.m. we had a Zoom call with Sean and Mark and Selena were on there, as well as Arnie Roblin and Wayne Krieger, who were the founders, pretty much the founders, along with Lindsay of OHRC, and they also supported the funding of our projects. And the call was with Oregon Angler Alliance, which is now about 65,000 members. They include angler organizations, marinas, sporting good places, Oregon Hunters Association, Forest Products Industry, and they're growing. They have legal background with them now too. And there's a lot of scientists and biologists and people involved in the organization. And the purpose of the call was to clarify the mission and goals of OHRC, which what OSU and ODFW, how they are interpreting the goals and mission is different than and not consistent with what the founders had in mind. And the OAA people were listening in actually when we made a motion with the board to alter the mission statement to include discussion of fish abundance. And the reason, so they were kind of upset about this, and that's why they put in the call. And in order to clarify their intent of the law and the mission and goals, they brought in, we had Arnie Roblin and Wayne Krieger, who were the founders there. So to make things very clear. Now, let me just do this as briefly as possible, but this is how ODF and OSU are interpreting the mission. The goal of OHRC is to answer scientific questions related to fish recovery and hatchery programs, including differences that may exist between HO and NO fish and how to better manage those differences. Research the mechanisms that create differences between wild and hatchery fish and ways that better manage those differences to meet fishery conservation objectives. That's pretty much the goal that Mark, I think you gave the scientists when you started this, the group you got together, and kind of the way the research has been going at OHRC. Now let me read you, this is quoted from Wayne Krieger and Arnie Roblin, the founders. The primary purpose, mission, and goal of OHRC is to scientifically determine how hatchery fish and our hatchery operations can enhance sport, commercial, and tribal fisheries by identifying and implement management strategies that provide for hatchery fish abundance with acceptable risk to naturally produce fish. That's a bit different than the way we're headed. What they're saying essentially is the purpose of OHRC is a tool to help ODFW restore harvestable fish abundance while minimizing the risk. And it's that whole mission that they have has kind of been aborted and changed to just kind of carry on science forever without having a goal directed to improving hatchery fish and hatchery fish abundance. So it's quite a bit different meeting, and I don't know where you go for this, but a lot of folks out there, I'm just relating this back. It's not all coming from me. A lot of folks are very frustrated, and I think they're coming close to facing a lawsuit to pull the funding away from OHRC. And I'm just giving fair warning that could happen. Another thing I'd like to bring up, if you remember earlier in a meeting when Bruce McIntosh was there, I mentioned that if the board wasn't happy with these projects and the way they were going, in fact, when the 3 research projects that we approved, and let me remind you that that I was fully in favor of these projects. Cam and I went to the House Ag and Natural Resources and testified to try to get funding for the House Bill 3012 and was totally in favor of that. But when we put together those outlines, there were actually the kind of flow charts. There were points through each of these projects where we measure the progress. We look to see if they're headed towards the goal. And what we thought at that time was the goal of restoring fish abundance by improving the hatcheries and the cost, the funding of these projects. So at any time, the board could make a decision. Bruce came out and said, oh, no, we don't. It's not up to the board to make that decision. We can give advice, but OSU and ODFW will make that choice. Now I did a little bit of research and let me read this to you. This is ORS 498.833. This is the law. Now this is in regards to House Bill 3012, which is funding the 3 projects that we have. This is House Bill 498.833, Section 1, number 2. Monies in the fund may be expended only as research projects recommended by the Oregon Hatchery Research Center Board. It doesn't say OSU, it doesn't say ODFW. It says the Oregon Hatchery Research Center Board. So it's up to us. Another part of the law says, this is 498.833, Section 1, Oregon Hatchery Research Center Director. The State Fish and Wildlife Director, after consultation with the chairperson of a department related to fish and wildlife at Oregon State University and the Oregon Hatchery Research Center Board, established under ORS 498.825, shall appoint a director for the Oregon Hatchery Research Center. So whatever director is appointed, the board has a say in this. And, you know, we've been led to believe over the years that I've been on the board, it seems like that OSU and ODFW have tried to kind of capture the oversight of the OHRC, but the board does have a strong role in what takes place as far as identifying, picking the new director, and we can do whatever we want with the funding of these projects. It's up to the board. And I just wanted to make that clear. And like I say, my frustration with this process today was, I think the mission statement and goal of the founders who originally set up OHRC should have been considered as projects are picked and selected. I think it would have short-circuited the process. I guess we'll see where this goes. It appears that OSU and ODFW are going to continue trying to have oversight of OHRC and in the direction the research goes, irregardless of what the founders had in mind. And I hope it doesn't come to pulling funding to get back on the track of the founders. And again, us board members, we're a vote, but we all represent, you know, large groups of people behind us. I'm representing, I guess, as well as the South Coast anglers and the forest products industry. I've been involved with this OAA, 65,000 people now and growing with a lot of clout, because they've got a big voice and they've been frustrated that the fishing opportunities are disappearing, going downhill fast under current ODFW policy. They don't think the research is aligned to get us there, to restoring fish abundance. And they're very frustrated, and they're the ones that are funding these projects. And I'm just trying to relate where a lot of the public is coming from. I support OHRC. I have from the very beginning. I've put in a lot of time and effort with it, and I want to see it. I want to see it do what the people expected it to do, and I think it has tremendous potential. And I'm afraid there's quite a risk coming that we might lose a lot of support for this facility. And I just want to relate that to you. And I think direction needs to be altered some. I think Brad was right in the very beginning, what he said, the direction we're going, we have to have these hatcheries, and hatchery, the OHRC can be a tremendous asset. I don't want to lose it. That's why I'm telling you this. That's about it.
No, hey, Scott, thank you very much. And honestly, in the effort for full transparency, I did want Scott to speak today because it definitely impacts the board's responsibility, what our role is in the future, and certainly the importance of what we're doing here for sure. And I do think that for one question you had, Scott, was the process of selecting a new director needed to involve the board, and I can assure you that it will. And I've been in contact with Selena and Sean and Cedric in that regard. And it's a process now. In fact, Mark, actually, I think Sean had asked you, or no, Selena had asked you to give us an update on that process. But to put your heart at ease, Scott, for sure, and mine, we will be involved in the selection of the next director. We just haven't had one because David was here the whole time. But Mark, do you want to talk briefly about that process?
Okay, so I'm going to read a message here from Selena to me. She says that we have 11 applicants and the search committee will meet on October 1st to recommend an interview list. She's emphasized the importance of science communication, securing external funding, and working with the board in this position description. She needs the board's help to develop a clear set of expectations for the position that can be shared during interviews.
Thanks, Mark. And so finally, just to kind of put a ribbon on this, you guys, because we do need to adjourn here shortly, but so Scott's group's concerns can tie into my opening comments about the paradigm shift. Because of climate change, population increases, honestly, we do need to look at this differently, more like the tribes, that hatchery fish are not evil, that they are going to be actually a part of the solution, a very important part of the solution. But that's not to diminish the role that OHRC needs to play in that solution. And again, we need to get at the heart of the differences between wild and hatchery fish and understand what causes those so that we can create the best hatchery fish. Anything other than that is a diversion. And so those of us that are on this board need to be studying as much of the science as we can, studying as much of the climate change, population increases, just anything that's going to impact demographically, genetically, or economically our fish resources in this area so that we can be informed. We've got a huge role to play, and Scott, I appreciate your input. But yeah, I just kind of want to leave you with those thoughts. I'm looking forward to December, you guys, when we get these proposals back and fold that into this particular personality that we have. So I think with that, I mean, I'm willing to listen to a motion to adjourn unless there's some other comments.
I have one comment.
Go for it.
Hello? Have we thought about a second location for our research center in case we do have a big slide and put us out? We ought to name another location. And we ought to just think about that, just something to think about.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not involved in any of those kinds of conversations. Scott, I don't know if you've been involved in that, or Mark, but thank you for that thought. Being proactive. Any other comments for the good of the group? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion, yes.
Is there a second?
Second from Lindsey Ball.
Thanks, Lindsay. Discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks again, every one of you guys, to your contributions. See you in December. Stay healthy.
Thank you, folks.
Bye-bye.
I.